Okay, so anyway, moving on to today's assignment. Today's assignment is lab number 7 in your workbook. And it is the one that looks like kind of a funky X shape. Realistically, though, this is not going to be that hard of a shape to do. You don't have to figure out any strange angles. All of the angles that go into making this come from the triangles that you have. So, if we take a look at this, and if I can get the computer to cooperate, I will bring it up on the board, but so far this morning, every time I try to open Windows Explorer, it just does nothing, so I'm pretty sure my computer is about to die. If that happens in the middle of the lesson, we will move on as best I can. Let's see here. 3. Alright, here we go. Alright, so here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to center this in the middle of our paper. That's why once again you have a piece of title block paper in front of you that does have the center marking on it. So what's the first thing that we're going to want to do to draw this shape? Measure the horizontal or the vertical. You can choose which. And then do what with that measurement? Put dots, but yes, that's exactly right. And then let's finish that thought. And where do we put the dots on the paper? In the middle. So you measure the horizontal, you find the middle of your paper, and then what do you do to figure out where the dots go on your paper horizontally? We're missing one step here to get to place it right. Centered, but how? How do we know?
Do you want me to explain it?
Just yeah.
Okay, so it's 4 inches wide.
Uh-huh.
So you want the left side to be 2 inches and the right side to be 10 inches.
Right. So you take your 4-inch measurement, divide it in 2, and then you put the center, so in this case it is 2. You put the number 2 measurement on the center of your paper. So remember, like this. Take your scale, find the number 2. You know what? There you go. And you place it so that the number 2 is centered on your paper. Okay? Justin, you want to put your phone away and follow along, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Alright, let's see. Zoom in on that a little. There we go. Alright, so we have I have my scale set up so that the 2-inch mark is sitting on the center mark of the page. And then it was put a mark at 0 and a mark at 4. Okay. Gives us the outside edges. And who wants to explain the horizontal or the vertical measurement for me? What do I do here? Somebody I haven't heard from. Sure.
So it's 5 inches tall. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go vertical and make a mark at the 0. Well, line the cross with 2.5.
Okay.
And then make a mark at 0 and 5.
Perfect. And you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either line it up with the center, or you can line it up with one of the dots that you just made. The reason I would go with that is because it gives you an easy way to know where your line stops and where it starts for drawing the top line up here in just a minute. So I'm going to set 2.5 on the center line. In this case, I'm choosing the dot. And then instead of making a dot, I'm just going to draw my line from 5 inches down to 0. Remembering that I've got that chunk cut out of mine, which is why the bottom of mine looks terrible. And then to save myself a step, I'm just going to slide it over to the other dot that we made and do the same thing again. 5 down to 0. And then I'm going to connect the bottoms before I move my parallel rule. Now, I am pressing harder than I'm probably going to want you guys to do, because that way you can see what I'm drawing easier on the board. But most of these lines are going to be erased by the time you're done. Yes, sir?
Where do you put the vertical dots?
The vertical dots, look, so here and here.
Yeah.
So the whole sheet, or the whole shape that we're drawing is 5 inches tall.
Yeah.
So we put 2.5 inches aligned with the center, and then you draw a line that's 5 inches long. So from 0 up to 5 inches. And again, like I said, I'm pushing lightly you should be pushing lightly when you draw that, because most of these lines are going to be erased. Remember, if we look at our drawing here, everything in these cutouts are going to be erased from this box that we just drew once we finish getting the inside stuff done. And then, okay, so following having that U shape done, the last thing I'm going to do is connect the top, so I have a box. There. So sometimes this can feel like extra work, but as long as you have, and I said this last time, but as long as you have a box that fully contains your shape, then you'll know when something goes wrong with your drawing if your lines are trying to go outside of that box that you've made. When they are square or rectangular shapes, it ends up being a lot simpler to create the box that it fits inside of. But even today, even when I do drawings now, this is where I start. It just gives me... it takes the entirety of the paper that we have available, and it constricts it down to just the area that I'm working in. And like I said, it helps me understand if something's going wrong with my drawing, and it helps me understand the overall size and shape that I'm trying to work with. And in some cases, it even takes care of lines that I would need to put in later. Okay, so if we look back at our drawing again, we're gonna do as much of our measuring as we can to start with before we start drawing our lines. So generally with this shape, I work from the bottom towards the top, because most of the information about your horizontal measurements is at the bottom of this drawing, and then they transfer up to the top. So, for example, this first line over here is 1/2 of an inch at the bottom. It's also 1/2 of an inch up here at the top. It's 1/4 of an inch on the right-hand side at the bottom, and it's also 1/4 of an inch at the top. So yes, that's how I figure that one out. The sides are going to be a little more tricky, and I'll show you why that is in just a minute. Because if we look here, this 1 inch mark right here is not telling us where this corner is that I'm going to try and highlight right there. That 1 inch mark is not telling us where that is. It's telling us where this horizontal line is right here. And this is pretty easy to figure out the location of, but we have to do some other stuff first before we can do that. So first things first, like I said, we're going to do our horizontal measurements. So I'm going to set my, set my my square back on my parallel rule and line it up so that 0 to 4 inches is measured across the bottom of the shape. So like I said, we'll make our mark at 1/2 of an inch over. And then on the other side, at the 4 inch mark, so where it's measured to 4 inches right now on here, we're going to come back a 1/4 of an inch. Or if you're reading the measurement on the ruler, it'll be 3 3/4 of an inch. So right there. The other thing I'm going to go ahead and do before we start doing any of our angles is put that we're going to put that line in 1 inch up from the bottom, but at the moment we don't know exactly where it needs to be placed horizontally. So we're going to make a line that is longer than we need, very lightly, so that we can erase the parts we don't need here in a minute. And if that sounds confusing, it shouldn't be. We'll just give it a second here. So I'm going to line up the bottom, or my parallel rule with the bottom line. I'll make a mark at 1 inch above that. Put my pencil on the mark I made and move the parallel rule up. And then obviously this line is far longer than it needs to be. But that's fine because it gives me plenty of room to know where I'm going to have to stop these angled lines that you see right here. So when I draw this line up, it gets stopped by that 1 inch high line. So that's the last of the horizontal or vertical lines that we're going to draw for this. Everything else is going to be a measurement based off of one of your triangles. In a couple of cases, kind of both. And I'll show you what that means in just a second. So I think the first one that I'm going to want to draw is going to be this 30-degree angle over here. And to do that, it's going to be really simple. So we're going to take our 30, 60, 90 triangle, set it so the hypotenuse is resting on our parallel rule, like that. And then I'm going to line the edge with the inch measurements on it up so that that dot that we made, a 1/4 of an inch from the right-hand side line, is touching that 30-degree angle. So just like this. And then I'm going to draw a line up to that 1 inch or the horizontal line we drew last. So 1 inch from the bottom. And I went ahead and made that one pretty dark because I know that this is a line that I'm going to keep. There's going to be no erasing there that I'm going to have to do afterwards. If we look back at our drawing, the next one that we're going to do, if we want to continue working from the bottom up, is the 45-degree line on the opposite side. Again, the process is exactly the same, except this time we'll use our 45-degree triangle. But everything else about the process is the same. The hypotenuse still sits on our parallel rule. We line up one of the equal length edges so that it's touching that dot we made a 1/2 of an inch from the left-hand side. And we carry our line up to that. Again, I made it as dark as I felt like I needed for my final drawing, because again, this is one that we won't have to erase. Now, before I move the triangle, we're going to have to use both of them together to find our next measurement. We're not changing angles, but if we look at our drawing here, it says that this leg of our funky X shape is this top edge of it, I suppose, if you want to call it that, is 1 inch away from the line that we just drew. So the only way to measure that is to take our 30, 60, 90 degree triangle and lay it against that edge we just drew our 45-degree line against. So you see what I'm doing here? We have my 45-degree triangle here, and we have the 30, 60, 90 triangle set so that it is pointing up and to the left. I think after 32 years, I'd instantly know what's left and right. But sometimes I have to think on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to put a mark at a measurement that is 1 inch away from the line we just created. Okay, so we have our line here. We're measuring up this direction, and we're putting a mark at the 1 inch mark. Once that's taken care of, I will just slide my 45-degree triangle over. Follow the same process that we did just a minute ago. The only difference is I'm not going to press as hard as I did, because part of this line is going to be erased where it meets this line right here. And we will do that after we finish the top. So from our line, I'm just going to pull up a ways as long as I know that it is farther than we need. Okay. We're going to do the same process that we just did for the other side. This one is 1.5 inches away from the 30-degree angle. Okay, just 1 second. You're going to switch triangles so that you're back, so that you have the hypotenuse of your 30, 60, 90 triangle set up like this. Set it against the 30-degree angle on the right-hand side. Okay? And then you set your 45-degree triangle like this on top of it. It may not fit if you flip it over. The numbers are just backwards, so but they still measure the same. So we would line up like this, and for this one it's 1.5 inches up. So you come up this triangle 1.5 inches and make a mark. Bring your 30, 60, 90 degree triangle over to that mark and draw that line that you know is too long. Other side? That'll be true. That's where we can start with. Straight. Great. Okay, so the top portion has all of the same skills that we just did, but you don't have to switch triangles as often. So here's how we're going to do the top. If we look at it, you can see that it is a 30, it has a 30-degree side and a 60-degree side. And because it's a triangle, we know that this inside corner right here is going to be 90 degrees. It's 30, 60, 90, 180. So if we take our 30, 60, 90 triangle and put it like this, we have all of the angles that we need to draw this. Now, there are a couple of ways. If your paper is closer to the bottom of your drafting board than mine is, then the easiest way to finish this is to, well, here, let's all do this first, and then I'll show you that. So take your 30, 60, 90 triangle and set it so that the smallest end is sitting on your parallel rule. Okay? So it's going up and down. Line up the parallel rule and the long measured edge of your triangle with that dot that's 1/2 inch away from the left-hand side. So the start of your 45-degree angle at the bottom. And transfer that measurement dot to the top. You're going to do the same thing over here on the 1/4 inch measurement on the right hand side. Okay, so I put a dot right here. Don't put the little arrows, I'm just trying to help you see it that I just drew. Alright, so like I was saying, if your parallel rule can go up high enough, my paper's pretty close to the top of my board, so this is not going to work for me. Oh, actually I might be able to do it with the inside cutout. If you lay it like, whoops, upside down. If you lay it like this and can do it, you should be able to not make or draw this in such a way that your lines are not too long. So what I can do here is, with the cutout in mind, there's enough space that I can use it as my straight edge, and I'm just going to draw down on the left hand side and then on the right hand side at the angles of the triangle. Okay. I'm going to do some editing because I haven't been sitting here the whole time, but by the end of today this video will be on Canvas so that you can follow along and finish up if you aren't done. Alright, so essentially I'm going that way and I'm going that way. If you cannot fit your triangle like that, then you can slide it from side to side and do the same thing. Or if it's up too high to even put your triangle on there upside down, you can do it like this. From the point down and go a little too far. Slide it over and do the same thing on the other side. And then our last steps are going to be the same. We have 2 lines left to draw and everything else is erasing. So what I'm going to do is take my 45-degree triangle, set it up so my measurements that I want to use, so the measurements for an inch are going away from this edge of my triangle. And if we look at our drawing, the space between this line and the one below it is 1.5 inches, just like this corner over here. So you're going to come 1.5 inches from this line down this way. So just like we did a second ago. Except I'm doing it slightly in reverse. And what I mean by that is, instead of putting my angle on the line we drew already, I'm putting the measurement on the line we drew. So I don't even have to do a measurement dot. I can just go ahead and draw my line. And it's going from the edge of the drawing on the right side to the line we drew below that we knew was too long. Okay?
So you go down how far on that right side?
1 1/2 inch. So just like this. I put it so that 1.5 inches was sitting on the line I had already drawn up here. And then I moved my 30, 60, 90 triangle until it comes up flat against the opposite side of my 45-degree triangle. Just like that. And then I can get that out of the way because I don't need the measurement anymore, and just drew the line between this on the right hand side and the line that we drew below. I'm going to draw the last line the exact same way, except this one's only 1 inch. So I put the inch mark on this 60-degree line. Get my triangle out of the way. Draw that. And that's all of the lines that you have to draw to finish this shape. In order to move forward the last thing we have to do to finish this is erase all of the bits and pieces that we don't need, so that all we're left with is what was in the drawing that's not in red or light gray, I think is how it's printed in your books. So using my erasing shield, covering the corners I want to keep. And as soon as I finish erasing this up, I'll be around to help anyone who needs it. Okay, and notice in my erasing that also includes the box around the outside that I don't need. And if you drew those outside lines pretty lightly, or if there's anything that's light in what remains, you need to go back and darken them in so that you can see them better with CamScan. Or, so that they're obviously intentional lines even if we weren't turning them in through the Canvas app. Or, yeah, that thing. And if you're wondering what all of these cutouts are for on here, we'll discuss what some of them are for once we start having need of them. Like some of them help you draw specific kinds of lines, dashes, if you need a curve taken out of something. Now, because I don't want to smear or smudge my paper, I'll go ahead and use my brush. And that's essentially it for this one. I didn't do it, but make sure you put your name, assignment, and drafting P1 in there for me.